Hello, I'm Congressman Hakeem Jeffries. I represent the 8th Congressional District here in New York and also have the honor of serving as chair of the House Democratic Caucus. I want to thank the invitation for me to participate in this conference where we are discussing a free, secular, and non-nuclear Iran. The Iranian government brutalizes its citizens and exports terrorism throughout the world. And so I commend you on your courage, on your strength, and on your leadership in helping to bring about a free, a secular, and a non-nuclear Iran, and to give the Iranian people the types of freedoms and liberties that they deserve. I stand with you. I know that members of Congress on both sides of the ideological spectrum, Democrats and Republicans, and both sides of the Capitol, the House and the Senate, stand with you. And that the Biden administration also understands the importance of bringing about a free, a secular, and a non-nuclear Iran. We want to unleash the brilliance and the talents and the abilities of the Iranian people that are being suppressed by a brutal regime, and lift up freedom and liberty for all.
I'm happy to be with you today to stand in support of a free and democratic Iran. The oppressive regime in Tehran and its new president has a history of suppressing freedom of speech, supporting terrorism, and seeking nuclear weapons. To the families who have lost loved ones in opposing this regime, I'm sorry for your loss, and I share your concerns. But I also have hope. Hope that America, along with you and our allies, will see a democratic Iran that protects free speech and the rights of all people. Hope that the dark days of fear under the supreme leader will subside and Iran blossoms into a responsible democratic nation. Imagine it, a free Iran. Thank you for striving to make this goal a reality in our lifetime. Together, it can be done.
Hello. Iran is the home to humanity's first human rights document, the Cyrus Cylinder. But today, the Iranian people are forced to live under an autocratic and corrupt regime that targets its own people and is the chief state sponsor of terrorism internationally, from Syria to Lebanon, to Gaza, to Europe, to South America, and across the globe. We must not forget what this regime is and what it has been capable of doing. The world should not forget the mass murders carried out by the Iranian regime in 1988. It was in July of that year that Ayatollah Khomeini issued the bloody order to annihilate the enemies of Islam immediately. Executions of thousands continued for months, with hundreds of people hanged each and every day before being buried in mass, unmarked graves. Today we know that as many as 30,000 political prisoners had their lives taken from them. They lost their lives because they supported the dream of a free Iran. I'm the lead Democratic sponsor of House Resolution 118, a resolution supporting the people of Iran and their desire for a democratic, secular, and non-nuclear future. This resolution also condemns the current Iranian regime's systematic human rights violations and its state sponsor of terrorist acts against America, Iranian dissidents, and others. In addition to that resolution, in February, Congressman McClintock and I led a letter addressed to President Biden urging him to work with our allies, including particularly our partners in Albania and other Balkan countries, where Iran has expanded its presence, and to hold the regime accountable for breaching its diplomatic privileges and to call on nations to work to prevent the malign activities of the Iranian regime's diplomatic missions. The regime of Tehran uses violence and espionage to target its own people at home and abroad. A prosperous Iran must begin with a peaceful Iran, where the Iranian people's freedom and human rights are restored. We must work toward a secular, non-nuclear, and democratic Iran where these goals can become realities. But there is some hope that the regime will soon be on its last legs. We saw how the Iranian people boycotted the recent elections. They were not fooled by the desperate attempt to distract them from the regime's corruption. There are so many around the world who stand in solidarity with the Iranian people and who are working for a new chapter in that great nation's history. This new chapter will be written by Iranians, not Americans. Democracy will come to Iran from Iran, not from foreign military intervention. But we must support the Iranian people as they fight for democracy. I want also to take this opportunity to recognize the inspiring work of Madame Rajavi. She has shown her unwavering support for democracy, for women's rights and minority rights in Iran. All human beings are born with equal and inalienable rights and fundamental freedoms. These rights are not limited to just some of us. They belong to everyone, including the people of Iran. I remain dedicated to helping those who are trying to achieve democracy in Iran.
Ladies and gentlemen, greetings to my Iranian American friends and people from across the world who are participating in 2021 Free Iran's online conference. I am Joe Wilson, a member of Congress from South Carolina and a great admirer of the people of Iran. As a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I am deeply concerned about the Iranian regime's malign activities and murderous agenda. Year after year, the Iranian regime is a serial perpetrator of gross human rights abuses and remains the #1 state sponsor of international terrorism. The world is right to be concerned about the Iranian regime's nuclear weapons program, but it also should be critical that we acknowledge that Iran's mullahs also rely on terrorism against the citizens of Iran and terrorism against the international community to survive. It is no longer a secret that they use terrorism as a leverage in their international dealings, and they've been using their diplomats to plan terrorist activities. And certainly indiscriminate killing of innocent people who are demanding their basic rights in Iran speaks to the brutality but also the weakness of the regime, which betrays the extraordinary cultural heritage and the talented citizens of Iran. My friends, I urge you and my colleagues in the United States Congress to remind the world that Iranian people want a secular, democratic, and non-nuclear republic. This is the message of Iran's vibrant resistance units and the message of House Resolution 118, of which I am a proud co-sponsor. I'm also grateful to introduce House Resolution 2117, the Iran Human Rights and Accountability Act, in this Congress. This legislation will hold top prison heads and IRGC officials accountable for their arbitrary detainment and abuse of Iranian citizens. The goal of improving human rights for the Iranian people have never been more urgent given the murderous history of Hassan Rouhani's successor, Ibrahim Raisi. Thank you for your encouragement, and thank you to Madam Rajavi. Your leadership and your dedication are making such a difference for a secular, democratic, and bright and positive future for the young people and all the people of Iran. Thank you.
Greetings, my friend and Madam President. I want to let you know that I stand with all of you for a free Iran. My name is Dean Phillips, and I represent Minnesota's 3rd Congressional District in the United States Congress. I'm so happy to join you today at this year's Free Iran Conference to once again express my support for a free and democratic Iran. The Iranian regime has, for 40 years, suppressed its people and exported its brand of fundamentalism and terrorism with impunity. And I'm an original co-sponsor of House Resolution 118 because the Iranian people have been deprived of fundamental freedoms for far too long. The Iranian people deserve the right to vote, to be confident that elections are free and fair, and to experience gender, religious, and ethnic equality. I join you today to call for a democratic, secular, and non-nuclear Republic of Iran. The United States Congress has shown on many occasions that it stands with the Iranian people, and I'm so proud to be one of the members of Congress who have supported and will continue to support that meaningful change in Iran. A democratic country is the key to prosperity for Iranians and others in the entire region. So I want to thank you again for inviting me to address your global conference, and I wish you all a day when you can hold this conference in a free and democratic Iranian nation.
Congresswoman Sheila Jackson Lee, this conference is so important that in the midst of my duties here in the United States Congress in the 18th Congressional District, I thought it was so very important to salute the 2021 Free Iran Conference, because we want a free Iran and we want the democracy that is necessary to empower the women, children, youth, and families to say enough is enough. We demand democracy. Thank you to Sister Miriam Rajavi, who has stood with her 10-point plan to lay out the role that Iran should be playing in protecting Iranian citizens. You should never give up your fight. The late John Lewis, who came here with me, understands that the people who are dissidents and standing for democracy should never give up, never give out, and never give in. You who are resisting must never give up, never give out, and never give in. Thank you to my sister for the opportunity for the world to see. I was glad to be part of the fight to take you and the organization off of the terrorist list. We made that fight and we were successful. You are a free and democratic organization who brings about the idea of freedom. I was glad to support HRES 118 to be able to ensure that the world knows the story of the freedom fighters in Iran. Republicans and Democrats have stood on the record of knowing what an important message you have, Sister Rajavi. Thank you for leading. Thank you for being unafraid. Thank you for bringing us together. We are the United States of America, standing with those who believe in democracy in Iran. And I'm here to be able to commemorate, celebrate, salute, and honor that democracy be spread around the world, that free people are able to speak about freedom, that you're not denied if you are a dissident, if you want change. The young people are willing to stand up for democracy, and they're reading and understanding the 10-point plan. So let me close and simply say it is an honor to be able to stand with you, those who love democracy. Thank you, Madam Miriam Rajavi, for your leadership and all that you do as a leader of the free people of Iran.
Hey everyone, Congressman Brian Fitzpatrick here, and thank you for inviting me to your 2021 Free Iran Global Summit. And as a co-sponsor of House Resolution 118, which expresses support for the Iranian people's desire for a democratic, secular, and non-nuclear Republic of Iran, and condemns violations of human rights and state-sponsored terrorism by the Iranian government, it is an honor to speak with you today. And as a member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, I believe that the United States must always speak with one voice in support of freedom and liberty.
We must be clear in supporting the rights of Iranians to choose their own future, which is critical now more than ever, following decades of appeasement and concessions that have made Iran the world's largest state sponsor of terrorism. America and our allies must make it clear to Tehran that taking violent action against those who peacefully assemble to demand change will result in the application of further targeted sanctions against the regime and its terrorist proxies. In the days following November 15th of 2019, the Iranian government cracked down on protests, leading to the death of 1,500 protesters, the bloodiest anti-protest crackdown since the Islamic Revolution in 1979. Iran's mounting aggression against their own people and their direct and imminent threats to Americans serving in critical missions abroad cannot be ignored. We must also call for an independent inquiry into the 1988 massacre of political prisoners in Iran. In 1988, the Iranian regime slaughtered over 30,000 political prisoners. 3-member death commissions were established across the country to facilitate the assassination of political prisoners that refused to abandon their beliefs. These victims were buried in unmarked mass graves, and under international law, the Iranian regime must guarantee the families of victims their rights to know the truth about the fates and the burial places of their loved ones. Today, I am proud to join you in support of a democratic Iran, ensuring basic human rights, and as a co-sponsor of House Resolution 118. Know that I will always have your back and will continue to promote a free Iran throughout my entire tenure in Congress.
توفنده منم قیام کوبنده شوم جنبش توفنده شوم سوی بنا و بیت تو سیل خروشنده شوم خروشنده شوم خروشنده شوم میهن غارت شده را خلق خیانت شده را برون کشم ز جنگ تو
Hello, I'm Congressmember Judy Chu from California's 27th Congressional District, and I'm so proud to join with my Iranian American friends and constituents at this year's Free Iran Conference. For years, I've been proud to stand with you in the fight for human rights and democracy in Iran. And each year, this conference sends a powerful statement to Iran's leaders that their repression and violence are unacceptable. But instead of heeding your repeated calls for human rights, peace, and democracy, Iran's leaders have continued to respond in their usual way, through terror. Iranians who are brave enough to speak out have been tortured, beaten, waterboarded, shot, and more. And they even tried to bomb the 2018 Free Iran gathering. Fortunately, the would-be terrorist was caught and convicted. But these repressive and brutal responses show why we must stand up to Iran's leaders. And that is why I was so proud to be a co-sponsor of House Resolution 118. This critical resolution condemns Iranian state-sponsored terrorist attacks and expresses support for the people of Iran who are engaged in legitimate and peaceful protests against the Iranian regime. I am proud that this resolution has 246 bipartisan co-sponsors already, which is the majority of the House of Representatives. Having such a large bipartisan bill condemning the Iranian government's support for terrorism sends a clear signal to the people of Iran that they are not alone. That message is especially important now, as one of Iran's most brutal killers, Ebrahim Raisi, was just elected president in an election that was neither fair nor free. Instead of trusting the Iranian people to choose their own leaders, Iran's Guardian Council manipulated the election to clear the way for the man responsible for mass murders in 1988. Thousands died by his orders, and yet, instead of being held accountable, Raisi has been put in a position of greater power over others. This is deeply troubling for all Iranians, but especially women, minorities, those who fight for free and fair democracy, and all who respect human life. That is why it is more important than ever that we continue to speak out against this state-led violence, and why we need resolutions like House Resolution 118 to let Iran's leaders know that we are watching, and to let the people of Iran who fight for freedom and democracy know they are not alone. The Iranian people deserve to be free from the harsh and violent rule of Iran's mullahs, and the world deserves to feel safe from Iranian support for terror and violence. I support your work to establish a free and democratic Iran that works with the U.S. and others to build a safer world. So thank you all for your important work to promote human rights and a more free Iran.
I thank the respected representatives of the U.S. Congress for participating in this gathering, and also for the continuing support for the Iranian resistance. House Resolution 118, which was signed, presented, and approved by you and many of your colleagues in the U.S. Congress, in fact, by 242 Democrats and Republicans, reflects the reality that the U.S. Congress stands with the people of Iran who seek to change this regime. I hope that the House of Representatives takes important steps in supporting the Iranian people's demands and calls for the prosecution of Raisi and Khamenei as criminals of the 1988 massacre.
Hello, everybody. This is Congressman Scott Perry with a message to the members of the 2021 Conference on Free, Secular, Non-Nuclear Republican Iran. First of all, let's talk about the sham election of your so-called president, Ebrahim Raisi. It was not a fair and free election. Even the Amnesty International report shows that. This was not the will of the people. This is a sham election, number one. Number two, This Raisi character, as I will call him, as you know, is a murderer. I'm here to tell you that the rest of the world knows that you're living under the tyranny of a murderer, whether it was his part in the commission, I think it was the death commissions in 1988, whether it's his involvement in the political deaths of political dissidents in 2019. This is a person who should not sit at the seat of power, who is not legitimately elected, and is not the legitimate leader of the people of Iran who seek and yearn to breathe free. The message for you today is that we recognize your plight, we acknowledge it, and we stand beside you. We in America are ready to do all that we can, including sanctions of the most onerous type to the regime in Iran to bring them to heel so that you can breathe free and so that your voices can be heard. Take hope, keep the faith, and keep fighting. The rest of the world is with you. God bless you.
Dear friends at the 2021 Free Iran Conference, I am honored to be here with you today in this global forum to declare my support for democracy and human rights in Iran and express my solidarity with the Iranian people. Iranians have endured a lot in the last 40 years, from the brutal suppression and trampling of their basic rights to losing many of their children during the peaceful street protests and to losing hundreds of thousands of their compatriots to COVID-19 because of the Iranian leaders' indifference and incompetence in dealing with the pandemic. I am proud to be one of the original co-sponsors of HRES 118, which expresses support for the Iranian people's desire for a democratic, secular, and non-nuclear republic. This resolution has over 240 bipartisan co-sponsors in the U.S. Congress, which demonstrates the will of the representatives of the American people in supporting a democratic and free Iran. As stated in this resolution, tens of thousands of people gathered in Paris at the Free Iran gathering to show support for the opposition leader, Ms. Miriam Rajavi's 10-point plan for the future of Iran, which calls for the universal right to vote, free elections, a market economy, advocates for gender and religious and ethnic equality, and a foreign policy based on peaceful coexistence, and a non-nuclear Iran. The recent sham election is another indication of the regime's unabated disregard for the rule of law and democratic process. I believe U.S. policy towards Iran must be based on our commitment to human and women's rights, religious and minority rights, and our unwavering support for the establishment of a democratic republic in Iran. I thank you for the opportunity you gave me to address you today, and I wish you the best in your mission to bring about meaningful change in Iran. May God bless you.